I told myself there's a better way, and I will leave no stone unturned. Right. And that became a mantra for me to just dive into my mental health, my physical health. If this was a mission and this was something that needed to get done, all right, we're going in. We're going full. We're going all in.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Sharp Performance Hero's Journey podcast. We're really excited. I'm going to be your host this week, Steve Bunting, the head of coaching here at Sharp Performance. We're very honored to have one of our performance coaches, Steve Milgazo, here. Prior to Steve coming to us as a performance coach, he was a Air Force Special Operations Pararescueman for 6 years. And then he decided that wasn't enough. He chose to go on another adventure and join the SEAL teams and did 2 decades there. We're really excited to hear his story and to hear that journey. So I'd like to welcome you, Steve. Thanks for coming.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this day. It's good to spend this time with you, brother.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, man. So, I'm very curious to hear about that, to go from Air Force Special Operations, PJs, which are awesome human beings, tremendously good at what they do, which is already a difficult selection to go to be a Navy SEAL. Can we talk a little bit about that transition and what would make you want to do something like that?
That was around the mid 90s. And so I enlisted in 1989. And so there's not a whole lot going on, and when you get into this kind of line of work, you want to do the job, right? And when you get into combat jobs, you got to go to combat. You got to do something, some kind of conflict. So at that point, it was a small skirmishes here and there. Panama, I think, was at the time was the biggest thing was going on. And Desert Storm. And so I was too early for Desert Storm. So all it was is the other thing. So I was like, okay, how can I get into some kind of action? And at that point is like, I had to make a decision. Either I was going to go to 24 Special Operations Squadron and work in JSOC with them, or I could, choose something else. And I met some SEALs, and I was kind of intrigued by their community, and also at the same time, I was like, you know what, I want to get a degree. I want to do something with that degree, because I knew a lot of guys that got degrees and weren't doing anything with them. So it kind of came together. It was like, all right, well, maybe I'll get a commission and go into SEAL teams, because at the time there was no officers in pararescue. So that's what I did. And that was kind of it. And it was like, it was something to do. I was like, so many people asked me that. I was like, well, why did you do that? And I'm like, well, it was something to do, because it's just, I was, trying to, move forward in a career and hopefully find myself into some kind of action. Who knows that, God only knows. Nobody knew that 9/11 was, up in the horizon.
Oh, yeah. Wow. So it sounds like you were definitely chasing that adventure.
Yeah.
And maybe you were looking at, the writing on the wall with where you were in timing, and you felt like maybe to be a Navy SEAL might put you in a better position to actually see some action and get what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I guess when I went in the Air Force, got into pararescue, didn't really know what I was kind of getting myself into from the perspective of, hey, this is, one of the hardest jobs you can do. And then once I got into that community, it was great. It was like, wow, this is elite stuff. And at the time, I was stationed down in Cocoa Beach in Florida, and we were doing all the space shuttle rescue support, because they were launching space shuttles like left and right at that point. And so that was pretty cool. I mean, lots of jumping out airplanes in the middle of the ocean with boats. And so it was fun. It was exciting. Going into the SEAL teams is like going to BUDS. It was like, okay, I kind of know what I'm getting myself into this time. Like, I didn't have the beautiful ignorance going in like I did into the Air Force. So I knew, BUDS was going to be a bit of a challenge. So I walked into that knowing, but it was always in the back of my mind, like, this is not impossible. Like, people have made it through this program. So what was definitely interesting in that journey, moving into more of a leadership position, is as a leader, like, it's a different job. It's not just being a shooter anymore. You got to be good at that job, but now you actually got to be a good leader and lead people and be productive and effective as a leader and an operator.
So not only did you switch components and go to the Navy, but you actually came in as an officer.
Yeah.
which is a totally different ball game. And I'd love to jump into that in just a little bit. But I'm really curious about what type of upbringing makes a Steve Milgazo and makes someone that, goes from wanting to be a pararescueman to a Navy SEAL commander. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and maybe any formidable areas that kind of led you on that path?
Yeah, it's funny. To answer that question, I really didn't know the answer until I went through a transition program. Part of that transition program was just a couple of days talking about your why. When I reflected back, a couple of years back when I went through this transition program, what came up for me was like I really wanted to help people. And where that kind of came from was everybody has challenges in their upbringing. I think everybody does. And I had some that were kind of personal and worse than bullying and stuff like that. And it was just like, you know what? I think through that experience, it was like, it kind of put me in this position of, you know what? I want to be able to protect people. The first job that I left after high school, and that was kind of when we were doing the whole why thing, was like, that was the most formidable point, is like, you really want to protect people. So it's like, yeah, because Air Force Pararescue, I mean, you're going down on a cable into whatever you get yourself into, and you're there trying to pull, a survivor, pilots or whatever it is, out of a situation that could be pretty hairy. So that has always really appealed to me, to be able to basically put myself into danger to pull people, out of it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that's a reoccurring theme, I think,
For sure.
coming back here. So, yeah, I think that was, some of it. Like I said, I mean, I grew up in Brick, New Jersey. I had a pretty decent upbringing, great parents. I mean, of course, there's always some challenges there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that happened to me early on, they didn't really know about until later in life. And so I think, knowing now, a little bit about trauma and things that happen, when you're young, it's like I was dealing with that. They didn't really know about it. And in that way, it was shaping me.
Yeah.
But I think there's two components in this. It's like I've thought a lot about what makes a Navy SEAL. When I was going through this whole why thing, like what are we creating? I spent some time in a training command. It's like you really wonder, like, who out of this group of people are actually going to make it through this program?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of come down to this thing. It's like, it's like a mixture of adversity. You need a certain level of adversity and you need a certain level of nurturing. The adversity, that's how you learn how to overcome. You build that resilience, right? That post-traumatic growth through whatever that is. And then through the nurturing, you're allowed to heal a little bit enough. I think people that get all adversity and no nurturing, they don't have the tools, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people go into, doing self-destructive things at that point. When you have some nurturing there, even that my parents didn't understand, but they gave me nurturing,
Mm-hmm.
the best they could. It gave me enough tools to be able to be a good teammate, to be able to have the characteristics that would succeed in these types of organizations. So I kind of came with both of those tool sets, unbeknownst to me, really, until you get put into the fray and you kind of figure out, oh, okay, I can do this.
Why'd you choose the Air Force over the other components?
I think part of it was the Air Force Junior ROTC.
Oh, gotcha.
And I don't know if I said that, but one of the old crusty, he was a tech sergeant, was the, instructor, and he was a B-52 mechanic. And so he was always talking about Air Force and stuff like that. And he saw something in me that he's like, and he slid me like an airman magazine. He's like, you should check this out.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, about pararescue.
Oh, wow.
And then there's a movie, it's a short clip, like a Huya movie about, basically helicopters coming in, over North Vietnam, picking up pilots, and there's friggin' Willie Pete blowing up all over the place. And, the A1, I think it's Sky Raider or whatever it is, they're flying around strafing and stuff, and guys on a minigun in the door. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I guess that was all that kind of put together was like, oh, all right, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I remember, is it the jungle penetrator? Was that the hook that you're referencing that they would push through the canopy with a PJ on it and rescue the guys up through the canopy? Did you ever get to work with that thing?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Air Force does the jungle penetrator because it wouldn't get stuck in the canopy, right?
Mhm.
And I know they went to the Navy and like the Navy's still got the strap or something.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. So you get into the Air Force and you that transition makes sense from high school because you're an Air Force, ROTC or JROTC. And then you get into the Air Force and you start like making this transition from a civilian into the military. What comes to mind when you start thinking about that process?
I mean, I kind of nerded out on the whole military thing. Like I had the haircut and I mean, I'm talking in high school, so it wasn't much of a process. I feel like I was kind of already kind of indoctrinated and on board at that point. I was at the point at home, I think, I was just ready to go. Like I mean, Brick, New Jersey, great, but like I didn't want to stay there anymore.
Yeah.
My parents like, oh, you should go to college. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to save you money. I'm going to save my time and not go to college right now because I knew that I was not in a place, I think just maturity, I was not ready to go to college. And it was funny because so much so that I didn't even sign up for the GI Bill when I got into the military. Like, oh, you want to sign up for a GI Bill? And I'm like, nope, not going to college. And then it's funny, my first supervisor was like, you didn't sign up for the GI Bill? Like, go down and sign up for the damn GI Bill right now.
You'd shake his hand today if you could, huh?
Oh, heck yeah. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough on that one. Yeah. So, as you got in, you became a PJ, you find yourself down and you said Cocoa Beach, rescuing astronauts from the ocean and doing all that stuff. And you decide that you want something else. You want something more, the idea of that adventure. You decide to make that transition. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that transition from the Air Force when you finally make that decision to walk away as a PJ and go to school and become a Navy SEAL?
So what I chose to do now, serendipitously, I say that with tongue in cheek. Hurricane Andrew happened in Florida around, I think it was 1996, and there was a reserve pararescue unit down in Homestead, Florida. Well, Homestead got wiped out, right? So that reserve unit needed a place to go. So they came up to Patrick Air Force Base where I was at, and so now they're sitting right across the flight line, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just go in reserves, and go to school full time. And so that was a pretty easy transition. So I finished 4 years on active, and then I went into the reserves and went over to that unit and just started going to school full time. And so I did 2 years there, 2 years still in Florida and at the reserve team, getting my associate's degree, while I was applying for colleges wherever I wanted to go. So the closest Navy ROTC unit in Florida at the time was Gainesville, so University of Florida. I called up there and I talked to some people, and because I had arranged like a physical and some other things, basic stuff to get into an ROTC program. And I found out that the Navy at the time had a 2-year scholarship program. So if you came in, you had an associate's, you could, do 2 years. They pay for the last 2 years of school, give you commission. And I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, nice.
I called them up and they're like, yep, come on up. And they're like, oh, hey, by the way, we got a SEAL that's up here. And he was doing the enlisted commissioning program. So he was going from enlisted, I think they call it Seaman Admiral now. They're going from enlisted into an officer program. And I'm like, great. So, and they gave me his phone number. I reached out to him. He's like, yeah, sure. Come on up. You can stay at my place, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, awesome. So a little bit of that, like his generosity, his openness, like just kind of that family feel, like, hey, your brother, come in, and he kind of opened that door for me. Really was like, this is absolutely the right decision.
And I think you're set up for pretty good success when it comes to just the PJ pipeline. So I know that you're already a diver, you're already a jumper. So do you feel like that set you up for success with kind of understanding what you're signing up for to make that transition over to a SEAL?
I mean, some of the programs are definitely completely different. But it definitely sold, it sold me. They, at least I think, from, SEAL instructor staff, like, okay, this is not just some dude,
Mm-hmm.
right? But having been a SEAL instructor myself, right, it's like, at the same token, it's like you still got to make it to the program,
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. There's some expectation that goes along with that, but there's like, okay, and then the double edge is like, I was also an officer.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like you have the expectation of, okay, you got to lead, you got to be, you got to, you don't have to be the best of the best, but you definitely need to, be, you know, in a high level of performance.
Did you feel that added pressure?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of experience at this point,
Yeah.
so I was very comfortable in that. It's funny because I had, I think my class is like 16 officers or something.
Oh,
A
wow.
lot of officers, and a lot of these guys came from the Naval Academy. And they're all still competing with each other. And it's just like, I'm just like, okay, you guys compete amongst each other. Like, I'm just gonna chill.
Yeah.
You guys do what you're gonna do.
Yeah. How many of them made it?
Actually, most of them. I think we lost. I think we started with about 18. I think we lost maybe 2, and
Okay.
there was most of them were Naval Academy. There was a couple ROTC. I was one of them, and strangely enough, there's a couple of Air Force Academy guys that commissioned from out of the Air Force Academy and then like lateral transferred over immediately into the Navy. And apparently, there's a couple of people every year they do that with.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So knowing that you already had you had some experience, you had some maturity in the military. So a lot of that, illusion's gone and you can kind of see things for what they are, play the games the way you needed to. What did you find the most difficult about that transition through the Buds pipeline from, coming in with all the experience you already had?
I mean, I was a little older. Buds is no joke. It's definitely a hard program. I was 27 at that point. So, the wear and tear is like, I had to take my recovery a little bit more seriously. It was kind of knowing what's coming,
Got you.
Yeah. And trying to be okay with it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Because like when you're ignorance is bliss, man.
yeah.
So like you're just okay, just keep running, just keep, keep doing push-ups, whatever, but when you know what's coming, it's just like,
I like to say sometimes that awareness is a double-edged sword, and it sounds like that was something that you were definitely experiencing, where you're like, I know what's happening, I know what I got to do, but I still got to take it day by day.
Oh yeah.
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
and just eat it one bite at a time, and then you'll make it through. So as you make it through Buds, maybe you get to your first team and you start like fully making that transition over to the Navy as a leader this time and an officer. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition and maybe your first team or anything you want to share about that?
When I went through training, it was just Buds, and that was 6 months, and then you went to your SEAL team. My first SEAL team was SEAL Team 2, and I went there, and SEAL Team 2 is a very interesting place to start out, and there's a lot of legacy there, a lot of history there. There's as one of the 2 SEAL teams, the first SEAL teams, in 1967, and it had a reputation of being a hard place to go, right? And what hard, what it was really, it was just discipline and just expectation, and very strong Chiefs mess, and it was like, hey, you show up, we're going to PT a lot, and at the time they were very regionalized. So some teams, this team, SEAL Team 2, had Europe, and specifically, the winter mission in Europe, which was interesting, because this was all like Cold War, toward the end of the Cold War era. And so I remember the guy from Florida, he was from SEAL Team 2. He's like, dude, you like to go skiing, you want to go to SEAL Team 2. And I'm like, I want to go to SEAL Team 2, and go skiing in Europe.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go skiing in Europe. And I get to SEAL Team 2. And, they're like, okay, cool. You just got your trident, now we're going to send you over to Special Boat Team 20. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, where's the skiing in Europe? I want to go skiing in Europe, And so they sent me to Boat Team 20. And basically they sent me over there. I was still attached to SEAL Team 2, but they, basically TDY'd me over to the boat team, because they were like, we have enough officers in the platoons that we have, and so you're extra. And so we're going to send you over there. And I was an ensign, so I was an 01, right, to be a boat deck leader. So this is now my first experience as a leader. And other SEAL teams were like taking their ensigns and just putting them into a platoon. Right. And they were like the third officer. Right. And basically the third officer job in a lot of those platoons is like, here's the 60, here's the M60, get good at shooting it.
Horrible. Sounds like a horrible job.
And so, and that had its value in that you obviously, were working, you were in a SEAL team, you were working, you're learning all the tactics, and you were, slogging it out with a freaking 60, and just learning the bones of being in a SEAL team. So, I knew that was a possibility, but I was like, oh, that's what I was hoping. And then I was like, okay, you're going to go boat team. Well, I was like, at first I was like, I don't want to go boat team, but it was one of the best experiences I had, I think, for especially as shaping a leader, right? Because I was in charge. I mean, it was just me. I was like me, and I had a chief, and then I had, like 5 other enlisted guys, boat guys, and we had 2 boats, the 11-meter ribs, all the heavy weapons and radios. I mean, all the responsibilities as a SEAL platoon commander I had as a boat, as an ensign, deck commander. And so, we went and deployed. We deployed to Europe, not in the winter. Probably a good thing. We deployed the road to Spain. That was not hard, but it was a great learning experience as a leader. It really matured me as a leader because I had to learn, I was the one, I was in charge, like I was at the top, whereas you could hide in, some other positions. Right. So that kind of formalized me as a leader. And then after that, I came back and I did, an AOIC, an assistant officer in charge for a platoon at SEAL Team 2. And we wound up deploying again to Europe.
Okay.
Still didn't do a winter platoon.
Yeah, that's okay. When did things start to shift for you? Because you were in for quite some time. So I know this was the very beginning. What point, I imagine, was it around 9/11 that things started to drastically change, or did things start to shift in the teams?
So I was at SEAL Team 2. I had come back from deployment with the boats, and we were kind of waiting to get the platoon together and start doing our workup. And it might have even been early stage there. And then 9/11 happened, and we're like, oh shit, it's going to get real. Like things are happening. Like, this is not just going to go unanswered. Because I mean, everybody there at this point is like, most of the guys there were, they've been living in the 90s of just like little dust ups, and everybody gets recalled and nothing happens, but everybody's like, oh, like, we're going. This is like this is something. There's something happening. Then they were pinning it all on Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. I was like, okay, like, and Damnek's right down the road, and we saw them all fly out. We're like, oh, okay, like real things are happening. We were kind of waiting. Now we were a little frustrated because we were sitting there and we were still deploying to Europe. I don't know if you know this, like it's like, all the deployment orders that go out are coming from the theater commanders, and the theater commanders like, hey, I want this many, special forces detachments. I want this many SEAL platoons. I want this many boat teams. And EUCOM at the time was one of the strongest, the European command was one of the strongest, commands, in the group of other theater commanders, right? Because CENTCOM was like just, a farm team at this point. And then it became everything, right? After 9/11. So the European, there's like, no, we want our SEAL platoon. Like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like everything is, because all the West Coast teams took off, right? But they were, assigned to, Central Command, so they were all going and deploying, and we're stuck going to Europe.
Oh man!
So they put us on, mission for like. We were going to do the VBSS mission in case there was any like Al Qaeda squirting through the Mediterranean, and we had to go like take down ships and stuff like that. So it was a little humbling. Where it's like that didn't really work out the way we were hoping.
Oh man, I can only imagine.
It took a couple of years for like NSW really to get fully involved. Most of the teams were deploying, in the combat zone in some sort. My next deployment I would wind up going to Afghanistan.
That would be your first combat deployment? Yeah, I can only imagine that, just with what you shared about your reasons for wanting to leave the PJ community.
Right. And
you finally go through Budge, you make it, you get assigned to the SPT team. Now you're on a boat team. Now you're doing back-to-back deployments to EURCOM. And now you're like, oh man, this feels like the ship's going to miss me again.
Right.
Yeah. How did you manage that expectation through all that? And how'd you kind of keep your head in the game? And what kind of thoughts were going through your head during that time?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, timing is everything in that
Mm-hmm.
kind of work. Timing, place, being in the right place at the right time is everything. So Neil Roberts was the first SEAL killed. Neil Roberts came from SEAL Team 2 before he went over to JSOC. Neil Roberts' locker was like 2 lockers down from mine in SEAL Team 2. And so I remember, chatting with him. He's a great guy. I was a new guy. And it was kind of like, okay, that's the expectation. I mean, we're like, this is combat. We're going to lose people. I mean, at this point, we've lost people in training. Like, I think at this point, between pararescue and the SEAL teams, I know, less than a dozen, but more than a handful of guys that, got killed in training. That was like, oh, okay, this is a thing. So yeah, just kind of understanding, these are the things that could happen, but just being focused on what we're there to do. So I think, I mean, I had some great leaders in these experiences like that platoon. Even though we went to UCOM, we had phenomenal leadership, and we just trained. We trained for war, and that was the mindset. That's what we're gonna do. So it's kind of like, okay, when your turn comes up, and I mean, I think somebody even said this at some point, like when your turn comes up, you don't know when that's going to be, but you better damn well be ready.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
And it sounded like it was on the horizon, so it was easy for you to stay focused in that. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that experience there. I was just kind of curious about how you navigated all that because in my own career, there was a lot of expectation management for me, which caused a lot of my distress, to be honest with you, because I wanted things now. And in the military, you don't get to pick it. And like you said, sometimes it's just a matter of chance and timing and a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
Depends on what that looks like for you. So as you kind of navigate your career, I'm sure you went, maybe to different platoons and things like that and different teams. At what point did you decide that you were going to make that transition from the military out back to the civilian sector as retirement started approaching?
Well, I mean, I had 20 years had come and gone, and I decided, all right, I'm going to stick around. I was about to put '05 on anyway, and so I was going to stick and hang in there for that. So another 3 years. Unfortunately, at this point, I had been through 2 combat deployments. I had 2 kids. I had been married for probably, like 6 years or so. Things weren't going so great. I'm talking about like when I first got back from Iraq, and I went over to Buds and, went to training command, was an instructor there, stayed there for a while, moved up to the XO position eventually. I can say in hindsight, I can see what was happening. I was just burnt. I was burning out, slowly burning out. As I left, I came back from Iraq, and that was my last real operational deployment. As a troop commander. I had forces in Ramadi and Fallujah. That deployment, it wasn't overly violent. It was like at 2008. So, I mean, a lot of the, a lot of the destruction had already happened. A lot of the guys, that needed to get hunted got, hunted. And so we were doing a lot of, pickup work at this point. But it was an operational deployment. We had some great wins on that deployment. You come home and then it's like, okay, things are not going so great at home. Now you're doing like staff work, and your purpose, I think, starts to get attacked a bit there. Yeah. That's probably a strong word, attacked, but it starts to, you start wondering like, what am I doing? And so again, some great leaders that I come across, like, what? As an officer, you spend, half your career like doing the job, you're in it. And then you spend the latter half of your career supporting everybody who does those jobs, and that's just as important. Being able to reframe that and go, okay, well, yes, the teams and, platoons and all the guys, they need that level of support. So I did find some purpose in trying to be the best officer I could be, trying to be best staff officer, trying to help and support the operators as best as I possibly could in the positions that I was in. What's interesting, like in a platoon of guys, where you stand, and it's like you get some instant feedback, good and bad all the time. And it's pretty rewarding and it's fun. When you're a staff officer, you don't get that anymore. Or if you're like even up in higher leadership positions, you're kind of up there, and people aren't like coming in your office all the time and, hey man, let's go grab some beers.
Right.
It's so it is a little lonely up there, but, after many of these things and having some challenges at home, and just raising two girls, I'm like, ugh, I was starting to burn out.
I can see.
And I realized like, okay, I'm going to make I got to make the jump. And at this point, uh, I was 26 years active, but that doesn't count the 2 years of school that I did. And, the 4 years of schooling that I was still very active in the military and going from one program to another program. So I kind of, emotionally and physically, like I was still in it,
Oh yeah. Yep.
so 30 years total, right? From the time I left mom's couch, right? That's a lot of time. So I was just like, okay, I'm good. I think, I think it's time.
Yeah. 30 years chasing the dragon too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you were just hanging out. I can only imagine the toll that it started to take on you physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And then we both know how much of a toll it takes on our families as well.
Yeah.
So you make that transition, you decide it's time. I think I've done enough. It's time for me to go. What's that look like? Talk me through that transition of finally hanging up your hat and moving into the civilian sector, and what was the new journey and new path you found yourself on?
Unfortunately, it was really challenging. And I say unfortunately because, things in my relationship weren't going really well. And so I was retiring and I was getting divorced at the same time. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon from what I've heard with, some of the guys I've talked with. It was just a lot to be able to process. Going through all of that, losing, I kind of look at it like it was a complete identity overhaul.
Wow.
Right? Because I lost the family that I had built to this point. My relationship with my kids kind of changed. I didn't have the spouse, I wasn't in the military. I didn't have the trident, and I was grasping and just trying to figure out what I'm doing. And that's where that transition program was super helpful, to be able to kind of help me understand. And I did that probably a year before I actually got out of the military. So it was a good time to do it. And I was like going through all this stuff. So I'm like, all right, was at the point where I'm out, or I'm just about to get out. So I'm like trying frantically looking for a job. And it's like, okay, what can I do? What can I put down on a resume? And the best I could put together was like program management, because I was like expecting all, something else or this and that. It's like, okay, when you talk to people and get to the reality of it, it's like, okay, yeah, you're not just going to go be a VP or a CEO or something. They're not just going to pick you up for that,
Right.
So it's like, okay, what can I do? What can I put on a resume? Because I need a job, because I got, unknown financial future here. I actually found a great job. I got out and worked here local in San Diego at a company called Dexcom as a program manager. And I was at a director level, and it was a really good, well-paying job. And it just happened to be over COVID. Like I literally got hired in February of 2020, and then COVID happened. So everybody went home, So now I'm trying to be a new director out of the military, trying to figure business out, doing it at home.
Remotely.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so I went through that experience, and I just said, okay, you know what? That lasted about a year. I got to figure out what the heck I got to figure out. Like that's not it. Like that's not it. So it really took a lot of soul searching, a lot of reaching out to people, and just kind of figuring out. And it's like, it came back to wanting to help people and how best I can do that. Now I did like the program management job. There's a part of my personality that kind of like that, but I wanted to be talking with more people. I wanted to be engaging with people. I said, if I was like, if I was to start over again years, and I had plenty of runway to do it, I probably would have gotten to sales and, because I could interact with people all the time. Right. And somebody, kind of put it in my ear about coaching. And I was like, okay, that, let me, we talked, and, he was a coach, and I was like, you know what, that sounds pretty cool. So what are my options? And so there's an International Coaching Federation certification, stuff like that. And I kind of looked in that, and I'm like, I'm not sure life coaching really is the thing. In the experience getting out and just all the stuff I had to go through, I was under extreme stress, and I was breaking apart, like falling apart. Like, I mean, at my lowest I've ever felt. And I realized, like, I can't keep going on this road. I'm going to, explode, and I have to take care of myself better. And I just started researching, how do I do that? I mean, it's funny. It's like, I didn't even know how to take care of myself after all the years in the SEAL teams. It's like, you're just taught to go,
Yeah.
and push as hard as you can. And now I was at a point where pushing as hard as I can didn't work anymore. And so I had to realize something different. I had to learn something different. And I kind of, in reflection, I was reflecting that I actually really, from my days as, as pararescue a medic, learning about the body, physiology, things like that I kept really finding that very interesting. When I married that interest in health, I married it up with coaching. Like, health coaching kind of came together, and I was lucky enough to find a program here at a university here in San Diego that had a kinesiology program, which was my bachelor's. So I already had, a bachelor's in it, a kinesiology program in basically health and wellness coaching. And I'm like, okay, that sounds about right. Let's go do that. So I just finished that program, and it was phenomenal because it got me all up to speed on what's the latest in evidence and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's awesome that you went back to almost your original love there, huh? When it
Yeah.
comes to medicine and like the body. I'm a medic by trade as well, and I still love medicine. I'll say trauma medicine is my first love,
Right.
even though I've kind of come into this mental performance space. You were talking about just the unbelievable stress that you were under during that transition, that loss of identity. Then you're going through a divorce, and everything that comes with that. Now you're trying to reach out and find a new way, a new purpose. You get a new job, 2020 happens, and you're like, I don't know if this is it, to finding yourself into college. But you referenced that stress, right? How you realize that your body was just, you'd been running it kind of ragged there for a long time. Was there any kind of culminating events throughout that process of your health that really drove you towards that direction at all?
If rock bottom is a culminating event,
Yeah, for sure.
that's kind of what it was.
Okay.
I mean, it was bad, and I was going through the thick of it with the relationship and all, and I just hit rock bottom, and I was just like, you know what, I that was the closest I ever came to taking my life, and I did not, because of my kids, they were my North Star at this point, and I realized that I didn't have a good relationship with them because I was reacting. I was very reactive, and I was not in a healthy space, and I didn't even know how to be in a healthy space. And so I told myself, after many, days, and just meditate, just being and sitting with myself and all that pain, and just saying, you know what, there's a better way, and I will leave no stone unturned. Right. And that became a mantra for me to just dive into my mental health, my physical health, and just go in, like, and it was kind of like, if this was a mission and this was something that needed to get done, all right, we're going in, we're going full, we're going all in, and I kind of started putting it together, and I just said, you know what, if I was planning this mission, it's like, put everything on a freaking table, we're figuring it all out. And it was kind of like that, and I was devouring podcast books. I mean, I had one or two therapists. I had a coach at one point, all just getting different sides of the story. And like I said, I went through the transition program where we did a bunch of personality tests there, and it kind of helped me and gave me more data, and then I just started experimenting with my health and, like, cutting out, I mean, I stopped drinking alcohol at that point. and I stopped eating, copious amounts of sugar, which I realized like I had a very emotional attachment to that.
Yeah.
And it was funny is like, I was really curious about that. I'm like, why do I, like, what is this emotional attachment? And just sitting with that, like what actually is coming up right now, to be able to sit there and go, oh, I'm not even that hungry. I'm just eating because I'm sad or I'm upset. I'm not even hungry. And having that awareness, like having that, moment of like, oh, okay, I'm getting driven. My mind is getting driven by things that I'm not even aware of. Right. So it became a journey of trying to achieve more awareness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And thank you for staying in the fight too. Because I think we've all been there in some capacity and understand the gravity of that and how it can be a very desperate place. But it sounds like you transmuted that pain and you used it like you've always done to drive you further to become a subject matter expert, to even go to school, to justify and like get even more knowledge about this, to show up for people in a more in a powerful way. We're really honored to have you on our staff as a coach. You're a tremendous coach. I can't even tell you how many 5-star reviews you get. You're really making a huge difference in the people that you're working with. Can you share with me a little bit about how that experience has been, like working with Sharp Performance and coming in and kind of pulling it all together from where you came to where you are today?
It's funny because it was serendipity, as I think uh, I was looking for, I needed an internship to do with my school. But just even putting that aside, that was a thing, that was part of it. I was talking with, friends of mine, a guy who's a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and I was also talking to Punky, Punky.
Love Punky.
And I was just talking about, hey, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm at right now. And they're like, and two individuals not talking to each other said, I know the guys that you need to talk to. Right. And it was you guys. And at first I had to put it together. I'm like, okay, you guys are both talking about the same people. I'm like, okay, I gotta at least meet you and Andrew. And so that experience, that was like, okay, and then when we talked, I think is like, I realized that, hey, you guys are really focused uniquely on the cohort, people that are in these high risk jobs that are, dealing with a lifetime of stress, and not just, the emotional stress, but there's physical stress, there's exposures, there's a lot of stuff going on. All these folks are purpose driven. So they're not worried about their health, right? They're worried about making a difference and doing the work and, being there for their, the guys alongside them. Somebody needs to help them, kind of understand like, hey, like this is happening, whether you want to admit it or not. Mm-hmm. So it's been a great experience to be able to sit with a lot of these folks and have that conversation. And I think there's the health coaching part, which I love, but there's just the coaching part of it is just being two humans talking. And I realized, a lot of these guys like never have had these types of conversations with other men before.
Yeah.
Vulnerable conversations with, another guy talking about whatever it is that's going on, and just being able to provide that experience for them. I think that's probably one of the most powerful things when, you kind of come to that place and they're like, this has been great.
Oh yeah. What a beautiful gift to get to share a part in someone's life like that, especially when they're going through the thick of it. And you've been there and you understand it in a way that not a lot of people do.
Right.
Steve, we're so grateful to have you on the team. And I remember that first day I met you and it was just like, it's been a dream and it's been something that we all believe in. And it's been a tremendous value to our purpose and like kind of continuing to serve outside of uniform. We have a lot of members out there and maybe people that are listening today that might be on the fence, that might be looking around and they smell smoke, but they haven't acknowledged the fire yet, or they're not aware of it. What would you tell that person right now today that's kind of like hesitant about taking that first step? Any words of advice or wisdom that you would provide them?
Yeah, I'd say this as like, it's not about smoke or fire or something's broken. I look at it this way. There are those cases and, and that happens. once you're pushing past your 30s into your 40s, like your body's just aging. And when you're in this type of work, you're aging your body even faster than, folks that are just, have a, standard 9 to 5, because you're doing so much more and you're exposed to so much more. Like you guys, in these conversations we had, it's like, you want to be your best. That's a trait and a value that I think I've found, is just common with people in these types of work, in purpose driven, really hard jobs. They just want to be their best. They want to do their best. And I want them to do their best, right? I look at part of the role that I have now is like, how can I scale impact in the world? And that part of that is, if I can help people like this, they're going to go have an impact somewhere else, right? And it may be with, 10 or 15 or whoever, I don't know how many people they'll engage with and have an impact. The healthier they are and the better place they're in, arguably they're going to have a stronger impact, So for anybody out there, it's like, do you want to perform your best? There are things that you can do that will help, extend that, performance. There's things you can do to help, that transition before you kind of make the jump and move on to something else. Or even when you're younger, there's just things that you can do. Like, hey, your body may be a little bit more resilient, but there's things you can do to kind of offset some of the aspects of aging that's going to come. But so there's plenty of things you can do. So yeah, I mean, if you're, on the fence about coaching, it's like, just give it a shot. Just give it a shot. It's like, you may realize that, like, I've had this happen plenty of times. Like, I didn't know what to expect, and I'm still talking to them, months later, because we have things to talk about, and, they're working through stuff, and they're like, I didn't really think about it that way, so give it a shot.
Yeah, Steve, I love that. Thank you for those words. Two things that you really highlighted there is one, that nothing's wrong. Everything's okay. And this is just life.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets a little heavier than others, and we just want to be able to carry it better with more grace. I love that. And the other part that you highlighted that I really love is that, I believe that healing is contagious. Like you said, you start doing the work, it shifts within you, and next thing you know, it's shifting in other people around you. And I think that's a way that we can really start to kind of heal this world that seems a little bit sick and broken sometimes. So I love everything that you said. It's been great spending this time with you. Just want to ask you if there's anything else you wanted to say before we kind of wrapped up.
The work that we're doing, the work that, and the people that we work with, I mean, it's important work, and it's so impactful. And these are the types of people that we need more of in our society. And I just want, that's my goal in life, is just to be able to help support them go deliver their goodness out to the world. Take care of yourself, and, that's be healthy, and, and deliver what, God has put you on this earth to do.
I love it. Well, man, you started out wanting to be a protector, then you became a healer. You're undeniably in the right space, and you're in the right spot. We're honored to have you. Thanks so much for spending this time with us today.
Awesome, man.
I enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, brother. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Doggy.